When my biological clock finally struck, I was at a bar, of all places, on my 28th birthday. Not coincidentally, a friend had just told me about a loose mutual friend who was pregnant. Sitting there with my gin and tonic, news that normally would have raised just some vague, mild happiness in me caused me a strong pang of jealousy. My husband and I had been married for 2 years. We had a house. I had this general idea that I wanted to be a mom before I turned 30. And just like that, after years of wanting nothing to do with children in any capacity whatsoever, I wanted a baby with a vengeance. Or rather, with a vengeance. I wanted a baby. I didn't want a baby who had a vengeance. Just to clarify. Although I mentally willed myself to get pregnant immediately, my body had other plans. Just not knowing if I could get pregnant was the worst part. A snapshot of any given conversation my husband and I had during that time would go something like this. You have seedless grapes. You're acting crazy. So when I eventually took a test that was positive, I was elated. And as I went on to have a healthy pregnancy, and as I watched multiple close friends go through miscarriages and complicated and sometimes dangerous pregnancies, I felt so thankful and lucky to get pregnant and then carry a baby full term. I went on to have one of the most uneventful labors ever. It was still a ton of work. It is certainly called labor for a reason, but I was a labor ninja. My labor was so efficient, I didn't even have time to get the epidural I had requested. While in the hospital, my milk came in, and I had success breastfeeding. My husband claimed to love sleeping on the hybrid share bed thing. We were so high in endorphins, even the hospital food tasted weirdly good. We had some scares and challenges, but people were there, constantly checking on us, and they kept commenting on how well we were doing. We were naturals. When it was time to go home, I was nervous but confident. People do this all the time, I told myself. In fact, stupid people have babies all the time, and they're fine. All those people who warned us about the sleep deprivation and resultant fallout were exaggerating. This was some club you got to join with bragging rights. They were just being dramatic. But when we got home, the baby wheezed almost constantly, and she would cry for hours every day. Nothing we tried seemed to help either issue. She was also diagnosed with hip dysplasia, which meant we had to strap her into something that made her tiny body look like a spatchcock turkey. Then there was the hormone jumble going on, and my entire body ached like nothing I'd ever experienced. I knew I should be happy, but I was far from it. It occurred to me at the time I might have postpartum depression, but I just felt like that wasn't who I was. But what I was feeling, whether it was clinical postpartum depression or not, was truly awful. At one point, I needed to call my doctor's office to get some information from my employer involving my maternity leave. This should have been a simple phone call, but it was unbearably hard. I felt like I was in a hostage situation with myself. I was talking to a woman behind a desk at a medical office, not an actual medical professional, mind you, and I was so scared and desperate in my own body that when she casually asked me how I was, I had to fight my desire to burst into tears and/or tell her way too much information. I fought the lump in my throat and told her I was fine. I suspect my voice gave away how unhinged I actually felt, but as she could tell, she didn't let on. The next months were considerably better, but I still often felt that desperation. I tried to fulfill my child's and my husband's needs, but so many times I looked at what was right before me, and I wished I could go back to a simpler time. Knowing that I was feeling something like regret about having my child made me feel like such a terrible person. During that time, I would think of accidentally getting pregnant, and I abstractly pictured myself jumping out the window. I could handle what was going on right in front of me, but just barely. If one more bean were added to the pot, I felt like it would all tip over. I worried constantly that I wasn't taking good enough care of my daughter. I regularly had night terrors that almost always involved me either accidentally hurting her or I would see her in danger but couldn't get to her to help her. I did finally get some help in the way of acupuncture, but I could never admit to anyone that I was struggling as much as I was. As months turned into years, life continued to improve. But damn if the first 4 years aren't constantly stressful and filled with intense highs and lows. Kudos to all of you who have willingly signed on to bring more than one human into this world. I know it is easier for some than others, but it is certainly never easy. Kids can be the best, but they can be so utterly illogical and frustrating. Before having a baby, I would hear those never shake a baby commercials and think, what sort of asshole shakes a baby? After having a baby, I did realize, in glimmers, that when the baby won't stop crying and you're at a complete loss, well, you understand why those commercials exist. My daughter just turned 10, and I'm so proud of her, and I love her and like her so much. We're at a point where everything just keeps getting better. I realize we must be nearing when relations don't continue to improve and start to get worse through the tween and teen years. And that is when I know my husband and I will become the stupidest and most annoying people in the world. But I want that to happen, because I know that is nature taking its course. That is what will make her move out of our house and hopefully become a productive citizen. I know it won't be easy, but I feel prepared. I have grown as a person since those early days. Plus, you never hear never shake a teenager commercials. So, I'm guessing it can't be that hard.